Okay. Wondered if we could just go back for a second and you could say what Roanox Productions was.
It was never much more than Erwin and me. Um, we we formed it, well, in part because it was good to be a corporation in those days, in part because we needed a base, um, and we liked each other's company. It's a lonely business, and it's great to have somebody to talk to when you're not working, and make a plan. But neither of us had the taste for entrepreneurship, and if there are any other regrets, I think it's that we didn't do our own projects. We always wanted to do it for somebody else, which has its own reward. But we didn't make a lot of money where we might have.
Okay, when you say that, what would you have done differently then in that area?
We would have moved into an entrepreneurial. The place, for instance, the opportunity I had before Titanic. This is getting ahead of ourselves. I can save it, or I can give it to you now.
Save it, save it.
Okay.
Okay, save it. And we'll go to National. Well, wait, what did you do at AFI?
That was short and not very sweet. They wanted to make a bicentennial film about American motion pictures. It was called America at the Movies. George Stevens raised the money for it, and it was to be sort of the bicentennial film. Walper was on the AFI board at that time, I think. I think it was he who got me hired to produce it. And George and I, the chemistry was just not good. And he had already made up his mind exactly what film he wanted to make, which was basically pictures at an exhibition, a certain number of clips, and it's over. And there was really, literally nothing for me to do for the months that I was going to be working. So Ideal set up in this old stables at Greystone. I mean, the facility and my coworkers couldn't have been more ideal, but we were just sitting there not doing anything. So eventually I tried to do something, and George didn't like that, and we parted ways. It got finished, and it was fine. My only complaint in retrospect is that it was an awful lot of taxpayers' money for something we could have gone right to it in 2 months. It got stretched, and there was an advisory board, and Arthur Schlesinger, and people had to come out and talk about it. But basically, there was no creative job to be done.
So then where'd you go after that?
Back to Geographic.
So then that ties into the National Geographic specials with WQED?
Right.
Okay.
In the interim, when we went to MGM, Geographic continued very successfully on CBS. Then they went to ABC. And while they were at ABC, Erwin and I finished up at MGM, made Birds Do It, Bees Do It, and then came back to work on some specials. I wrote 2 or 3 of the ABC shows. Then I did America at the Movies, or tried to do America at the Movies. And when I finished that, the specials, the Geographic specials, had been dropped by ABC. They'd had a year out. We always say we've been on the air for 35 years. It's actually 34. Or whatever. Anyway, and then moved to PBS. And I came back to produce shows for PBS. And with a great stroke of luck, Erwin, my partner, who had made The Incredible Machine for ABC, the ABC era, never aired on ABC, went over to public television. It was the debut show on public television, and went through the roof. And so that was terrific. And that launched us into, I think, another 5 or 6 years of public television Geographic shows.
Was Wolper involved in these Geographic specials at all?
Not after they left commercial television.
Okay. And what was the transition like for you from going from, the difference in making documentaries for network television versus public broadcasting?
Well, it was great. Never wanted all those commercials anyway. Choice of subject matter was a great deal easier for PBS. I mean, it had a much broader, more liberal outlook. Didn't care so much about the ratings. And still, we were on PBS by far the most successful rating-wise thing that PBS ever had. So, some sort of going to the middle of the heap to maybe the bottom of the heap in commercial television, you go to PBS and you're their stars. And so it was great.
Were there any other significant differences in terms of your process? Well, you had more free reign with the ideas than at Wolper. I mean,
Yeah, I think so. It was just a different era, and everything had kind of grown up and matured. I think television was no longer tied so closely to the magazine. We started doing shows. Incredible Machine is a good example. The magazine had never done anything like that. In fact, I think they viewed it with some skepticism. They later did articles on the human body and later published a book called The Incredible Machine. But that doesn't quite prove my point because it was an ABC show to begin with. But that kind of thing kept happening later on at PBS.
now, who was in charge at WQED? Was it Thomas Skinner?
Tom Skinner at QED and Dennis Kane at Geographic were co-executive producers of the series.
Can you talk about each of them?
Yeah, right men at the right time. They were a great team, and they really did a lot with the specials, and gave this, was from my producer, writer's viewpoint, gave a tremendous amount of rein to people like me. A lot of encouragement. Neither one meddled. Neither one, although Dennis is a filmmaker, I think neither one thought that their forte were any of the craft, so they kept their fingers out of the actual making, and they were just terrific. We were all great friends, and it was a tremendous era.
Now, what about on the National Geographic special Treasure? How did that come about?
Well, this was a man named Mel Fisher down in Florida claimed that he had found the Nuestra Senora de Atocha, which was a Spanish galleon sunk in 1622 with a lot of gold and even more silver aboard, which people have been looking for those hundreds of years. Dennis Kane, the Geographic chief, somehow met Mel and decided this would be a great special and threw all sorts of resources into it. The hunt went on, but the thing was not found. Mel Fisher, the treasure hunter, had some bad misadventures, was accused of outright fraud, accused of forging ancient coins and artifacts, accused of just about everything. And the whole thing looked to be a fiasco. And Dennis was into this project. Wait a sec. Dennis was into this Mel Fisher treasure hunt for a couple $100,000 at least. I came loose from, I guess it was the AFI project. And he said, well, I'd love you to do something, but the only thing I've got is this treasure show. We look into it. And I looked into it. And he said, what, we got anything? Not really, because if this guy is a phony, you don't want any more of it than you got. In fact, let's leave it alone. But if he's not, it's a great story in the making. He said, well, find out whether he's a phony. So this was a new one on me, but I was willing to try. And on Geographic's say so, I started this investigation, which was really fascinating. I've never had such a open-ended assignment. And I went down to Florida and I talked to Mel Fisher and all the people who had worked with him and all his critics, and all his friends. Started doing diagrams and storylines and comparing stories and tape recording interviews and so forth. And it didn't take very long, a month or so, and I thought, yeah, there's something here. This is, the guy is not a crook. He's a liar, but he's not a crook. So eventually I came up with a way to test the theory that he was looking for the right ship in the right place by having a ball of encrusted silver coins, which was in the custody of the state of Florida, had actually been recovered by the state of Florida at the Mel's diving site. Having that taken apart under state supervision and examined by a numismatist to see whether all the coins in this incrustation, I think there were near 100, fused together in a solid block for several hundred years. See if all those coins were consistent with having been on that ship. And sure enough, they were. And it was amazing because not only I had a film to make, but Mel got a new lease on life. This got around, and we were off, and we made a film that was full of ups and downs because of Mel's peculiar character and his being in disrepute and being up again and down again and financed and going broke and so forth. And did not end with finding the treasure, but ended with finding the ship. And the tragic death of his son and his daughter-in-law and another treasure diver within a few days of discovering the ship. And Mel's deciding to go on and look for it further, for the treasure, which he did and found in 6 years later, after the first film ended. So there's a second film. But making the first one was really wonderful because it sort of crossed the boundary from filming a story, being part of it, and being on the right side, and having some role in resurrecting this guy's character and reputation was really great.
Now, did you have underwater photography for this? Did you do any diving on this?
No, I'm not a diver. There's a story. I told you, Curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
When I was, I think maybe 10 or 11, we used to go to a pond on Cape Cod, which was good for swimming. Fresh water, very clear. And far out from shore in the bottom, there was an old truck that had obviously been driven out on the ice and fallen through. Been there for quite a while, but it was a wreck of sorts, and fascinating. And because the water was so clear, you could see it, and you wanted to go down and see it better. But I couldn't free diving get anywhere near. About halfway down, I'd run out of breath. It's hard swimming straight down. So one day we had a boat, and I got a big rock from shore. I jumped over and held onto the rock, and I went down like a stone and got there. And it was fantastic. I was only down there for a few seconds, but I got to see what I wanted to see. Picked up a piece of rusty metal. Came up, and my eardrums just went wham. And they hurt like hell for a couple of days and bled a little bit. And I didn't tell my mom because it was so stupid to have done it in the first place. I wasn't supposed to be there. I think I wasn't supposed to have been out in the boat even. But my hearing is not the best even now, and diving is bad. If I get even a little bit of water behind the eardrum, I get ear infections. So this taken with all this fascination with underwater is kind of funny. But I stay in the boat. I push them overboard and, give them warm coffee when they come up, but I don't dive.
Wow, so you probably burst. Did your eardrums burst, do you think?
Much later, when I started having trouble with my hearing, I went down to a clinic here, and they looked in and said, "What have you been doing?" They perforated, but both healed. But there is the possibility of pressure either way. Uh, getting a little rupture and letting water in and getting infected, and it's not worth it.
Right. So now, so this show, would you call it a success?
Yeah, Treasure? Oh, yes. Yeah, it was great. And the when Mel finally got all the stuff, and he had an exhibit of the gold at Explorers Hall and Geographic, and the Queen of Spain came over, and it was glorious. It really was nice, and it was a popular show.
And you made the right decision.
It made the right decision. Yeah.
Okay, let me move on to what about the National Geographic special, The Great Whales, and how did that come about?
Well, that was a little later, and I really don't recall. I'd been interested in whales, and that sounds obvious. I mean, everybody's interested in whales, and in those days, not so much. When I was a kid on the Cape, a big fin whale washed ashore right near our house, and I remember it vividly, and I remember how people came down, started cutting pieces off it almost before it was dead, and that eye, and something, so huge, fascinated me. So time came, I didn't need to be persuaded. And there really wasn't much exceptional about doing it, except that it wasn't something everybody was interested in at the time. And out in Lahaina in Hawaii, they just discovered that humpbacks spent the winter there, and you could dive and get close to them. It's been going on for 2 or 3 years, and we went out and we had more than usual luck filming them. And we also went down to Mexico, and I think for the first time as professionals filmed the friendly whales, so-called. And we'd heard about this, and we'd seen some stills, which were just amazing. Big, 30, 40-foot whales beside little 12-foot zodiacs, just exhibiting curiosity about the occupants. So we went down, and sure enough, happened to us. This great big thing just right there, and reach out and touch it, and and they blow practically in your face. It was great.
Yeah. So was there underwater photography even though you didn't do it?
Right.
How about the National Geographic special Sharks? How did that one come about?
I think it followed whales. It was logical, and I thought it was too late. Jaws had been out for some time, or it may have been the other way around, I forget. But it was just a pretty comprehensive look at sharks, and the message was always more or less the same. These creatures are not hostile. In fact, they have their place, and we should leave them alone. And in fact, that they're very interesting. And it's more appropriate to appreciate them than not. Very successful show. I think still by some measurements the most popular public broadcasting show ever. And really the beginning of Shark Week. And I mean, it was the first time television hit that mother lode. It was just staggering to find that huge audience, because it is a fish. And everybody knows nobody's interested in fish. So, what's the difference?
And that was on PBS, right?
That was on PBS, right.
Now, what about, what did people, so it changed, would you say it changed people's perceptions of sharks from what they had been?
Oh, yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's hard to measure these things, and especially a show like that. I mean, there's a lot of imitators come along, so you have a multiplier effect, and it's not only what you do, it's that everybody joins in, and then there's a chorus, and next thing you know, a lot of people have had their minds changed.
Now, what about 2 shows you wrote, Animals Nobody Loved and This Britain? Can you talk about them?
Well, there are 2 geographic shows of the ABC era, when Wolper was in his last year or so with them. and both very nice shows. I didn't produce them, I just wrote the narration. Very rewarding in a way. I mean, you come along when most of the heavy lifting has been done, and it's fun to have that last final contribution. It makes you realize how musicians must feel doing a score, because it's there, but you know, they're the last few major contributions to come along and do that in a space of a month or 6 weeks is really great.
How about, can you talk about your experiences on location for the geographic specials? And how you found crews and how they found their subjects in the wild?
Yeah, well, it's been wonderful work. You would think it would be hard to find people who are good under those circumstances, but it really isn't. Word gets around, and you find the most extraordinary companions. And I think one of the best feelings I've ever had, I think, is when we're out with a crew and we have something hard to do, but we're doing it, and we're all on the same side, and we know that we can rely on each other, and we're doing something meaningful. It gives you a sense of what it must be like, I guess, to be with any crack team, elite group of soldiers or aerobatic pilots or something. It's great. It's great.
But now, how much time do you go out and spend with them? Because how do you get the animals to show up when?
Well.
Do you have to bathe them or?
Well, we do a number of different kinds of production. Most common is we hire one or two people, often a couple, to go and do animal behavior in the wild on their own terms, in their own time, for a fee, or, you know, they get the money, they go out, they do it, and they just take the time it takes to do. And their method is usually just patience and knowledge of the animal, being there at the right time, persistence, and a lot of expertise. Some animal behavior is predictable enough that you can go there and with a crew and hope to get it. And that's what I've done mostly. Serengeti migration, whales in the breeding lagoons in Mexico, or in Glacier Bay in Alaska. The predictable phenomena you can go and shoot. And on every major wildlife film, regardless, it seems like you have to go and at least try to get the animal and the scientist, or, you know, to film the phenomena itself. And you know probably it's not going to work, but it's better to interview the scientist in the field. You need all the background, so-called B-roll, how I hate that word. So you have to go there anyway. Well, why don't we take a few days and chase the animals around, you know? So you get the thrill of the chase, but quite often you don't get the real goods.
You've had the thrill of the chase. How about the danger aspect?
Had
any?
Few moments, not nearly. I mean, what kills people in our business is airplanes, for the most part. Of the people I know have died, almost everyone has been a small plane or a helicopter crash. I mean, we have divers that go do incredible things all the time, and you know, are fine. You have mountain climbers that go climb the mountain, or they don't climb the mountain, they come back. Knock wood, Geographic has had great luck, considering the things that we've been doing. We have almost no casualties to speak of. My one or two moments, the story I tell, is of being up in Ethiopia on the Manhunters. And I was young and stupid, and I broke the first rule that, you know, you don't take a crew to film things that cannot be predicted. But I went to Ethiopia on the chance that they would find a great epic fossil that would change all our ideas of the history of man, and we would be there to film the excitement and so forth. it was a long way from anywhere. We were dropped off by plane from Nairobi, and we made arrangements to be picked up on a certain day, and we were there about 2 weeks. And it was terribly uncomfortable, and we had badly estimated our supplies, and we didn't really have enough to eat without borrowing from the archaeologists who had little enough themselves. The beer was warm and very limited, long days in the hot sun. After a week, it was obvious we were there for no reason. I was mortified and desperate. My crew was surly. So when the day the plane came, we were ready to go, more than ready. And it was late. I remember sitting there in a pool of sweat thinking, if I don't get out of this thing, I'm going to lose it all. Comes the plane, late. We had to be back in Nairobi before nightfall because there was nothing between us and there. And the plane was not the same kind of plane that brought us in. And the significance of that was we brought in, say, 300 pounds of equipment and supplies, and we could take out only a great deal less than that. But the plane that came to get us had a much lower capacity than the plane that brought us in. Pilot came over to me and he said, 150 pounds, right? And I said, yeah. And we started throwing our stuff on the plane. And that was a lie. It was more like 200 pounds. We couldn't leave anything behind. I didn't think, really, what I was doing with that little deception. You know, it's like getting on the plane, you get an extra bag. Why worry about it? But it had a lot to do with whether we were going to get off the ground. But I was too hot, too uncomfortable, too desperate to get out of there to take that into account. So we were about halfway down, not even a runway, just this rutted field. And the pilot, I was sitting next to him in the co-pilot seat, and the pilot realized we were not gaining speed as we should. And he gave me a look, which is just pure alarm, hatred. You know, if you kill me, I'll kill you for this. Look, and we all froze, and we did get up, and we did clear the trees by a few feet, I suppose. It seemed like a lot less than that. Nobody said anything. We got up to altitude. We opened the windows. The cool air came in. We were on our way to Nairobi. We'd be asleep in the hotel that night. And I looked back at my friend, the cameraman, Andre, and we both started to laugh. And all of us, including the pilot, laughed till the tears were rolling down our cheeks. Because if that wasn't human folly, what was? And yet we all understood kind of how each of us had conspired to make that happen. Andre could have said, no, Nick, there's more, you know. Pilot could have said, hey, wait, this seems awfully heavy. We all contributed to taking that chance, and that we got away with it. We just celebrated.
So, oh God.
Yeah.
That's